Hello, today we'll be learning about deploying your first tool on Toolforge. We will be deploying a web server written in Python that will use Wikimedia login via auth. Full documentation is in this URL, w.wiki/D9. It's really well written and it has a lot of more detail that you can visit at your leisure. So this is the application that we will write. There will be a website. We will click login on a button. It will take us to our wiki of choice to log in with the Wikimedia unified account. Then we can allow permission, and it will take us back to our own application where we will have access to the user account, and then we can log out. The prerequisites are basic knowledge of Python, basic knowledge of SSH, basic knowledge of the Unix command line, and familiarity with the auth terminology. It's nice, but it's not required. We also need a Toolforge account. What we're going to be doing is that we will be creating a new tool account for our project. We'll be creating a basic Flask web service. Flask is a Python framework. And then we will be adding a configuration file for storing some of our secrets. And finally, we will add support for the auth workflow. First, we will create a new account. For that, we will go to the toolsadmin.wikimedia.org/tools URL. We will create a new tool. We will follow the instructions on the tool account creation form, and then once the tool account is created, we will log off, then back in before you can access the new tool account. After that's done, we will SSH into the login.tools.wmflabs.org URL. We will use as the login account our Toolforge account name, and we have to substitute it here. Once we have successfully logged in, we have to run become and the tool name with the tool name that we used in the form before when we created the tool account. Then once we are logged into the SSH session in the Bastion, we will create a folder for the Python project. We will use this folder structure /python/src, and then we will add dependency libraries for our project. We do that by opening a shell with this command line. The web service is a command line tool that's available on our SSH session, and we will specify the backend as Kubernetes and Python 3.5 as the type of project, and then shell will open a new shell session where we can do our installing. Once we're in the new session, which is the Kubernetes session, not the SSH session, we can run VM and create a new one. Then we can activate the environment that we just created, and then we will upgrade the package installer for Python so that it's on the latest version. After that, we will add the Flask library to our requirements.txt file on the src folder. That's a convention that's used on Python projects, and then we will install it with pip. And then after that, we will exit the Kubernetes shell and we will go back to the SSH session that we were in. For creating the Hello World application, we will create a new app.py file on the src folder, and then we will add this small file where we import the framework, we create a new application, and then we create in the root route, we return the Hello World string. Remember that all code in Toolforge needs to be open source. Then we will start our web service. In the SSH session, we will run the web service command again with the same arguments, but then we will say start rather than shell. That will start our web service, and then we can go to the URL tools.wmflabs.org/ and the tool account name that we created before. We should see Hello World in the browser. Some of the conventions for our application, you can see that there's some application logs that you will see in wsgi.log, and then the folders that we created, www/python. In src, we will have our source code, and then the VM is the virtual environment that we created before that will have the libraries that will be loaded. If you have any problems, look into the wsgi.log file or the error.log file that will be in the root folder, and you can use tail, for example, for looking at the logs. Then, third step, we will add the configuration file. We will open the Kubernetes shell for the Python project again. We will activate our environment, and then we will add the YAML dependency for loading a YAML configuration file, and we will install it. And then we'll go back to the shell session. After that, we will edit our application code, and then we will load the YAML configuration file. In this case, we will call it config.yaml. Basically, just in the current folder, we will look for the config.yaml file, And on the root route, we will return the greeting key from the config.yaml file. So now we'll create the configuration file that we just loaded on the app.py file. We'll create the config.yaml on the src folder. We will change the permissions so that we can only read it and no other tools have access to it in case we store some secrets. And then we will add the greeting key, which is the one that we were returning in the root route, with goodnight moon as the contents. That will be our config.yaml. After that, we will restart our service by running webservice restart. Then you can access the URL that, as we said before, with the tool account name, and you should see the new message, goodnight moon, loaded from our configuration file. Last step, and the bit more complicated one, we will be adding OAuth support for authentication. One easy way to do this is with the MWAuth library that we can install for Python. So as we did before, we will open a new Kubernetes shell. For installing a library, we will activate the virtual environment. We will add the MWAuth library to the requirements.txt file, and we will install it with pip. Then we will exit the Kubernetes shell, and we will be on our SSH shell. And then we will edit the application code on the app.py file. And there's a little bit more code with a few routes for logging in and out and the auth callback. You can look at it here. I'm going to show it briefly, but you should visit it and then copy paste it or copy it. It's a bit longer. As you can see, there's the root route that renders an index.html file, the login route, the auth callback for handling when the auth provider calls you back, and then the logout route. Feel free to inspect the code and ask any questions in the description of the tutorial if you have any. So as we saw, we were loading an index.html file. We will create a new template. Flask uses Jinja templates, and it looks for them in the src/templates folder as a convention. So we will create such folder, and then we will edit the index.html file, and we will add this HTML file with some template tags for rendering if you're logged in, a message in a logout button, and then if you're not logged in, the greeting, and then the URL for logging in. After that's done, we will need to add the auth support. So for that, we will register a new auth consumer. You can do so in this URL. After you fill that form, you will get some secrets that we will add to the config.yaml. For the callback URL, you will use the auth callback URL with your tool name. As you saw, that's what we were doing on the app.py file. And then as the contact email address, you will use your Wikimedia Unified Account email address. Keep the default settings, just with the basic rights. And then you will be able to use your own account for testing your auth login before the consumer has been approved. This goes through an approval process, but you can still use your account to test your non-approved auth support. We will add the consumer token and the secret token that we are given once we create the new auth consumer, and we will add them to our config.yaml. There are a few other things here. We'll add a random secret key, what's the application route, and the MediaWiki URL that we will use for auth, and then our consumer key and our consumer secret. We will add them that right here. We'll restart the service as we did before, and we can then visit the URL with all of our shiny code and verify that it works, hopefully. So as we saw before, this will be the flow. Without the styles, this application has a bit more styling, and you'll be able to log in, and then you will click allow for the permissions, and it will take you back to our deployed application with the new message that you're logged in and log out button. And hopefully everything worked out well. I hope you learned something, and if you want to learn more in depth, visit the URL with the full tutorial. It has a lot of good documentation and links to a lot of other useful things in case you run into any problems.